The stars had always called to humanity. When the first human ships left Earth in 2247, they carried with them the hopes and dreams of an entire species. They expected to find wonders among the stars. They expected to make friends. What they found instead was a galaxy that had no interest in welcoming them. Commander Daniel Hayes remembered the stories his grandfather used to tell. Stories of first contact, when human diplomats had approached the galactic conquered with open hands and hopeful hearts. The aliens had looked at them the way a person might look at an insect crawling across their dinner table. Curious, perhaps, but mostly annoyed. 300 years had passed since that day. 300 years of humanity trying to prove itself worthy of respect. 300 years of failure. Daniel stood on the bridge of the starship Resolute, his hands clasped behind his back as he watched the diplomatic feed from New Geneva Station. The massive showed the Grand Assembly Hall, where representatives from dozens of alien species gathered to discuss matters of galactic importance. Humanity had a seat at this table, technically speaking. It was in the back corner, behind a pillar, where no one could see or hear them properly. The ambassador was speaking. His name was Al, and he was a towering creature that resembled a praying mantis the size of a small car. His mandibles clicked together as he addressed the assembly, the universal translator converting his chittering speech into words that Daniel could understand. The humans have submitted yet another request for trade access to the rim sectors, Al announced. His tone made it clear what he thought of this request. As always, we recommend denial. The humans lack the cultural sophistication required for such privileges. Perhaps in another century they might be ready. Laughter rippled through the assembly hall. Daniel watched as the human ambassador, a patient woman named Helen Brooks, sat quietly in her corner seat. Her face showed nothing. She had been trained for this. They all had. Lieutenant Maria Santos stood at her station nearby, her dark eyes fixed on the screen. Daniel could see her hands shaking slightly. She was young, only 26 years old. She had not yet learned to hide her anger the way older officers had. "That is the 14th rejection this cycle, sir," Maria said quietly. Her voice was steady, but Daniel could hear the fury beneath it. 14th? And for what? We meet every requirement they set. We follow every protocol. Daniel nodded slowly. Logits say nothing. But sir, we cannot just keep accepting this treatment. We have done everything they asked. We have been patient. We have been respectful. And still they treat us like dirt beneath their feet. I know, Daniel turned to face her. And that is exactly what they want. They want us to lose our temper. They want us to give them an excuse to punish us further. We will not give them that satisfaction. Maria looked like she wanted to argue, but she bit her tongue and returned to her work. Daniel did not blame her for her frustration. He felt it too. Every human who served in space felt it. The Resolute was officially a cargo vessel, carrying supplies between human colonies. That was what the galactic records showed anyway. In reality, it was something else entirely. Something that no alien species knew about. Deep in the ship's secure hold, behind doors that required 3 different genetic signatures to open, sat technology that would make any alien engineer weep with envy. Weapons systems that could crack a planet's crust. Shield generators that could withstand a supernova. Engines that could cross the galaxy in days rather than months. And the Resolute was just one ship among thousands. This was humanity's secret. For 300 years, while they smiled and nodded and accepted every insult the galaxy threw at them, they had been building. Hidden shipyards in the dark spaces between stars. Research stations buried deep within gas giants where no scanner could reach. Factories on moons that officially did not exist, churning out weapons and ships and technology that the galaxy could not imagine. Admiral Cole called it the long game. She was the oldest serving officer in the Terran fleet, a woman of 97 years who had devoted her entire life to this single purpose. Daniel had met her once, at a classified briefing on Earth. She had looked at the assembled officers with eyes that held both infinite patience and cold, burning fury. "Let them underestimate us," she had said. "Let them think we are weak. Let them forget that we are watching. Let them forget that we remember everything. Because one day the galaxy will push too far, and on that day they will learn what humanity is truly capable of." Daniel thought about those words often. He thought about them when alien port authorities searched his ship for contraband that did not exist. He thought about them when human merchants were docking rights for invented reasons. He thought about them when he heard stories of human children being mocked and bullied in integrated schools across the galaxy. The humans were pushovers. That was what everyone said. Too weak to fight. Too stupid to realize they were being exploited. A species of cowards who would accept any treatment as long as they could avoid conflict. Daniel smiled grimly at this thought. If only they knew. The diplomatic feed continued. The ambassador had moved on to other business, having dismissed humanity's trade request with barely a second thought. Human ambassador Helen Brooks sat silently in her corner, taking notes on a small tablet. She would file her report. The report would be logged. Nothing would change. But somewhere in the vast archives of Terran intelligence, another mark would be added to a very long list. A list of every insult, every stolen technology, every murdered merchant, every treaty. A list that stretched back 300 years and grew longer every single day. The galaxy saw humanity as harmless, pathetic, beneath notice. They had no idea that they were building their own doom, one insult at a time. Maria Santos looked up from her station again. "Sir, do you ever wonder if this will actually work? All this waiting, all this patience. What if they never push far enough? What if we just keep enduring forever?" Daniel considered the question. It was one he had asked himself many times. "They will push," he said finally. "That is the nature of bullies. They always push until they find resistance. And when they finally push hard enough to wake us up," he paused, staring at the stars beyond the viewport. "Well, let us just say that no species in this galaxy will ever forget what happens next." Maria nodded slowly, returning to her work. The Resolute continued on its course, just another humble human cargo ship crawling through a galaxy that had no respect for its kind. But in the darkness of space, in shipyards that no scanner had ever detected, thousands of warships waited in silence, patient, ready. Humanity had learned to wait, and one day that wait would end. Haven's Rest was the most beautiful world humanity had ever created. 200 years ago, it had been nothing but dead rock and frozen dust. The first colonists had arrived with nothing but hope and determination. They had worked for generations, planting forests, filling oceans, building cities that gleamed like jewels against green hills and blue skies. Governor Samuel Price had been born on Haven's Rest. His parents had been born there. His grandparents had helped plant the first trees in what was now the Great Northern Forest. When he stood on the balcony of the governor's mansion and looked out at the rolling farmland that stretched to the horizon, he felt a pride that went deeper than words could express. 40 million people called this world home. 40 million humans who had never seen Earth, who knew no other sky than the gentle purple twilight of Haven's Rest. This was their world, their home, the product of their ancestors' blood and sweat and dreams. And now they wanted to take it from them. Samuel's hands trembled as he read the transmission again. The words had not changed since the first time he read them an hour ago. They would not change no matter how many times he looked. The Dominion hereby claims this system under the Expansion Rights Protocol. All human inhabitants will be relocated to designated zones within 90 standard days. Resistance will be met with appropriate force. No consultation, no negotiation. No acknowledgement that humans had lived here for 2 centuries. They had simply decided they wanted this system, and so they were taking it, just like that. Samuel walked to his window and looked up at the sky. It was midday, but he could still see them. Dozens of warships in orbit, their massive shapes blocking out the stars. More were landing in the southern settlements even now. Troops in chitinous armor, carrying weapons that could vaporize a human being in an instant. His aide, a young woman named Tors, entered the room. Her face was pale with fear, but her voice remained steady. "Sir, we have received reports from the Southern District. They have established a command post near New Harmony. They are telling people to begin packing their belongings." Samuel closed his eyes. New Harmony was where his daughter lived, where he played in the streets and went to school and dreamed about their futures. "Have they hurt anyone?" "Not yet, sir. They seem to be following standard relocation procedures, cold and efficient but not violent." "Not yet." Samuel turned away from the window. "Get me a secure channel to Earth, priority 1. The connection took several minutes to establish. When Secretary General appeared on the screen, Samuel could see that she already knew. Her face was calm, but her eyes held a storm. "Governor Price," she said, "I have been briefed on the situation. Tell me everything." Samuel told her. He told her about the transmission, about the ships in orbit, about the troops landing in his cities. He told her about the fear in his people's eyes and the cold efficiency of the occupation. When he finished, asked only one question: "Have they harmed anyone yet?" "No, ma'am, but they will. We have seen this before. The relocation zones they are sending us to are barely habitable. People will die, children will die, and there is nothing we can do to stop it." Was silent for a long moment. Behind her, Samuel could see shadows moving. The Terran High Council was assembled, watching this conversation. 17 of the most powerful humans in existence, gathered in a secure bunker beneath the mountains of Switzerland. Admiral Gregory Barnes stepped into view. He was a large man with gray hair and a face that looked like it had been carved from granite. He had commanded the Terran strategic forces for 20 years, waiting for a day that everyone hoped would never come. "This is not the first time," Gregory said. His voice was low and hard. "The took 3 of our colonies this way. The took 2. Every time we backed down. Every time we told ourselves it was not worth the cost, that patience would eventually win." "And now?" asked. "Now they are taking Haven's Rest. 40 million of our people, 40 million humans who have done nothing wrong, who built something beautiful out of nothing, and they are treating them like livestock to be herded." Turned to face the council. Samuel could not see their faces, but he could feel the weight of the moment. 300 years of history balanced on the edge of a knife. "I have spent my entire career believing that patience was our greatest strength," said slowly. "I believed that if we endured long enough, if we proved ourselves trustworthy and reasonable, the galaxy would eventually accept us. I believed that violence was never the answer." She paused. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. Something cold and final had entered it. "I was wrong." She reached for her console. Her hand hovered over a single button, a button that had existed for 300 years but had never been pressed. "For 3 centuries we have hidden our true strength. We built it in secret, hoping we would never need to use it. We swallowed our pride and our anger year after year, insult after insult. We did everything right." Her finger touched the button. "And they still came for our children." She pressed it. Across human space, in shipyards that had never appeared on any map, lights began to turn on. In the darkness between stars, engines that had never fired roared to life. On hidden moons and secret stations, weapons systems that no alien species knew existed began their power-up sequences. "Send the message," said quietly. "Tell them we are done asking." On Haven's Rest, Samuel Price watched as the sky began to change. New lights appeared among the stars, growing brighter by the second. Ships, hundreds of them, thousands of them, more ships than he had ever seen in his life, emerging from nowhere as if the universe itself had decided to defend his world. His communicator buzzed. A new transmission, broadcast on all frequencies. This is Admiral of the Terran Republic Navy, 1st Defense Group. To all forces in the Haven's Rest System, you have 90 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures. This is not a negotiation. Samuel fell to his knees. Tears streamed down his face as he watched the impossible fleet fill the sky above his world. For 300 years humanity had waited. For 300 years they had endured. And now, at last, the waiting was over. Stood beside him, her own eyes wide with wonder. "Sir," she whispered, "where did all those ships come from?" Samuel laughed through his tears. "From patience," he said, 300 years of patience. Above them, the fleet was already running. Overseer Al had been enjoying his evening meal when the alarms began to scream. He was a veteran commander with 40 years of service to the Dominion, and he had overseen dozens of operations exactly like this one. The humans were soft. Everyone knew it. They would complain and file protests and write angry letters, and in the end they would pack their bags and leave like they always did. This was supposed to be easy. His tactical officer, a younger named Al, burst into his quarters with his mandibles clicking in rapid panic. "Overseer, you need to see this immediately." Al followed him to the command center, irritation building in his chest. Whatever minor problem had caused this disruption, someone would pay for interrupting his meal. Then he saw the tactical display, and his irritation turned to ice-cold terror. The space around Haven's Rest, which had been empty an hour ago, was now filled with ships, not the small, pathetic vessels that humans usually flew. These were warships, massive warships, bristling with weapons that his sensors could barely identify. They filled the display screen like stars in a nebula, so many that the computer was struggling to count them all. "That is impossible," Al whispered. "Human fleet records show they possess fewer than 200 combat vessels, old ships, weak ships." "These are not in any of our databases, Overseer." Al's voice shook as he spoke. "We are detecting weapon signatures that we have never seen before, energy readings that should not be possible. Our shields would last perhaps 3 seconds against a single one of those ships." Stared at the display. His mind refused to accept what his eyes were showing him. This could not be happening. The humans were weak. Everyone knew they were weak. They had been pushed around for 3 centuries without ever fighting back. How could they possibly have built this? The communication array crackled to life. A human face appeared on the main screen. It was a woman, perhaps 50 years old, with dark hair streaked with gray and eyes that held absolutely no fear. "This is Admiral of the Terran Republic Navy, 1st Defense Group," the woman said. Her voice was calm, almost gentle, like a teacher explaining something to a slow student. "You have entered sovereign human space and threatened human citizens. You have 90 seconds to begin withdrawal procedures." Al found his voice. "You are bluffing. Your species does not have this capability. Our intelligence agencies have monitored humanity for 3 centuries. We know exactly what you are capable of." Smiled. It was a small smile, quiet and controlled, but something about it made Al's exoskeleton crawl. "You monitored what we wanted you to see," she said. "You studied the ships we let you count. You analyzed the weapons we chose to reveal. You read the reports we allowed to leak." She leaned forward slightly, and her eyes seemed to bore directly into his soul. "Did you really think a species that split the atom within 50 years of discovering flight, that walked on its moon within a single human lifetime, that turned dead worlds into gardens through nothing but determination and hard work, was incapable of building a proper fleet?" Al said nothing. His mandibles had frozen in place. "We knew you were watching," continued. "We knew you were counting our ships and measuring our weapons, so we showed you exactly what we wanted you to see: old ships, weak weapons, a species too pathetic to be a threat." Her smile faded. "Meanwhile, in the spaces between stars where your sensors could not reach, we built something else entirely." She held up a small tablet. "I have here a complete record of every interaction between humanity and the Dominion over the past 300 years. Every insult, every stolen technology, every treaty, every time your people laughed at ours and told us we were not good enough." She set the tablet down. "We asked nicely. For 300 years we asked nicely. We followed your rules. We respected your customs. We smiled when you spat in our faces and said thank you when you kicked us." Her voice hardened. "That was our mistake. We thought that if we were patient enough, if we were reasonable enough, you would eventually treat us with basic dignity. We were wrong. You have 60 seconds remaining." Al's tactical officer was shouting something about weapon systems and shield frequencies, but he barely heard it. He was staring at the display screen, watching more and more human ships appear out of nowhere. Where were they all coming from? How had humanity hidden this many vessels? "Overseer," Al said urgently, "what are your orders? Should we fight?" "Fight?" Almost laughed. His fleet of 30 ships against this armada. It would not be a battle, it would be an execution. "Begin withdrawal," he said quietly. The words tasted like ash in his mouth. "All ships, immediate withdrawal. Do not engage the humans under any circumstances." The fleet began to move. Watched as his ships turned away from Haven's Rest, abandoning the planet they had come to claim. Behind them, the human fleet held its position, watching in silence. Admiral appeared on his screen one final time. "A wise decision, Overseer. Please inform your government of what you have witnessed here today, and please give them a message from the Terran Republic." "What message?" Al asked. "We are finished asking permission to exist. We are finished accepting whatever scraps you choose to throw us. From this day forward, humanity will be treated as equals in this galaxy." Her eyes were cold as winter stars. "Or we will remind you why your ancestors learned to fear the dark." The transmission ended. Al stood in his command center, surrounded by officers who looked as shocked as he felt. "Send a message to the Dominion Council," he said finally. "Priority 1, tell them everything." He paused, still staring at the display where thousands of human ships floated in perfect formation. "Tell them the humans are not what we thought they were. Tell them we made a terrible mistake." "What mistake, Overseer?" Al turned away from the screen. His legs felt weak, and for the first time in his long career, he felt genuinely afraid. "We spent 300 years teaching them that kindness was weakness," he said. "We spent 300 years showing them that only strength matters. We pushed and pushed and pushed, thinking they would never push back." He looked at his officers with hollow eyes. "And now they have learned the lesson we taught them, and they have learned it better than we ever imagined." The fleet limped away from Haven's Rest, leaving behind a world they would never claim. Behind them, the human armada watched in silence, patient and unmoving. The galaxy was about to change forever, and it was only just beginning. The footage from Haven's Rest spread across the galaxy like fire through dry grass. Within hours, every species in the galactic Concord had seen it. The impossible human fleet emerging from nowhere. Admiral's calm ultimatum. The humiliating retreat of forces from a world they had claimed as their own. For 300 years, humanity had been a joke, a punchline. A species so weak and pathetic that even children mocked them in schoolyards across 1,000 worlds. Now suddenly, no one was laughing. Ambassador of the Syndicate called for an emergency session of the Galactic Concord. There were crystalline beings, their bodies made of living gemstone that sparkled and shifted with their emotions. Right now, Sform was flickering with shades of angry red and fearful purple as she addressed the assembled representatives. "This is an unprecedented escalation," she declared, her voice ringing through the Grand Assembly Hall. "The humans have violated every principle of galactic cooperation. They have hidden military capabilities from the conquered. They have threatened a member species with force. They must be condemned in the strongest possible terms." The chamber buzzed with agreement. Representatives from dozens of species nodded and clicked and growled their approval. Yes, the humans must be condemned. Yes, there must be consequences. Yes, this aggression could not stand. Then human ambassador Chris Palmer rose from his seat in the back corner of the hall. For 300 years, human ambassadors had sat in that corner. They had listened quietly as decisions were made without them. They had accepted whatever treatment they were given. They had never raised their voices or demanded attention. Chris Palmer was different. He was a gray-haired man with a soft voice and unremarkable features, the kind of person that other species had learned to look straight through. But today, something had changed. Today, when he stood, every eye in the chamber turned to face him. "Violated cooperation?" he asked mildly. His voice was quiet, but somehow it carried to every corner of the vast hall. "That is an interesting choice of words. May I read from the official record?" He produced a small data tablet and began to speak. In 2298, vessels attacked human mining operations in the Belt of Sorrows. 17 human workers were killed. When we filed a complaint with this assembly, it was dismissed as unverified. He looked at Ambassador. "I have the sensor logs if anyone would like to verify them now." His crystalline form flickered but said nothing. In 2341, forces detained human merchants in the outer reach for 8 months without charges. Our request for intervention was tabled indefinitely. Those merchants were never compensated for their losses. The representative, a massive reptilian creature covered in dark green scales, shifted uncomfortably in his seat. In 2402, the Dominion contaminated water supplies on 3 human agricultural worlds. The resulting crop failures led to widespread famine. 2,417 humans died, including 612 children. Chris's voice remained calm, but his eyes were hard as steel. The investigation into this incident was closed due to insufficient evidence. He set down the tablet. "I could continue. I have 412 more documented incidents, attacks, thefts, murders, humiliations. 300 years of humanity being treated as less than citizens, less than people, less than animals." The chamber had fallen completely silent. "For 3 centuries we chose peace," Chris continued. "We chose patience. We chose to believe that if we followed the rules, if we proved ourselves worthy, this assembly would eventually recognize our value as members of galactic civilization." He paused. "We were naive. We understand that now." He turned slowly, addressing the full assembly. "Humanity is not declaring war. We have no interest in conquest or revenge. We do not want to rule this galaxy or destroy our neighbors. All we ever wanted was to be treated with basic respect." His voice hardened. "But we are finished being victims. Any species that threatens human worlds, human citizens, or human interests will face the full consequences of that choice. This is not a threat. It is simply a statement of fact." The representative laughed. It was a harsh, barking sound, full of contempt. "Pretty words, human, but you are still outnumbered, still surrounded by species who have been spacefaring for while you were still living in caves. Do you really think one fleet changes anything?" Chris smiled. It was a small smile, patient and knowing, and something about it made this laughter die in his throat. "One fleet," Chris said. "Admiral commands the 1st Defense Group. That is what you saw at Haven's Rest." He paused. "We have 11 more." The chamber erupted in chaos. Representatives shouted and screamed, demanding explanations, demanding proof, demanding to know how this was possible. There was on his feet, roaring threats that the translator could barely keep up with. Ambassador's crystalline form was flashing so rapidly that she looked like she might shatter. Chris Palmer stood in the middle of it all, calm as a stone in a raging river. 300 years, he said, and somehow his quiet voice cut through the noise. "For 300 years we smiled and nodded and accepted whatever treatment you gave us. You thought that made us weak. You thought that made us stupid. You thought that because we chose not to fight, we could not fight. The chaos began to fade as species after species turned to listen. You were wrong. We built our strength in silence because we hoped we would never need to use it. We recorded every injustice because we hoped that one day this assembly would care enough to listen. His voice carried a weight of sorrow that silenced even the most hostile representatives. We wanted to be your friends. We wanted to be your partners. We wanted to build something beautiful together. He looked around the hall, meeting eyes of every shape and color. You taught us that kindness is weakness. You taught us that only force matters. You taught us that asking nicely gets you nothing but contempt. He straightened his shoulders. We have learned your lessons. We have learned them very well indeed. He picked up his tablet and walked toward the door. At the threshold, he paused and looked back. This assembly has 90 days to establish a new framework for human relations with the Galactic Conquered, a framework based on equality and mutual respect. If that deadline passes without progress, humanity will assume that the Conquered has no interest in peaceful coexistence. And then what? Someone shouted from the crowd. Chris Palmer looked at the speaker with tired eyes. And then we will stop asking for respect, he said quietly, and we will start taking it. He walked out of the chamber, leaving behind a galaxy that would never see humanity the same way again. 5 years had passed since the day humanity's patience finally snapped. 5 years since Admiral stood before the fleet and told them to run. 5 years since Ambassador Chris Palmer walked out of the Grand Assembly Hall, leaving a galaxy in shock behind him. The universe had changed more in those 5 years than it had in the previous 5 centuries. Captain Mitchell walked through the corridors of Concord Station, the massive diplomatic hub that floated at the center of galactic civilization. He remembered the first time he had visited this place, 15 years ago, when he was just a young ensign delivering documents to the human embassy. Back then, aliens had shoved him out of their way without a second thought. They had called him names in languages his translator struggled to interpret. A merchant had actually spat on his uniform. Now, as he walked down the same corridor, aliens stepped aside to let him pass. A diplomat nodded respectfully as they crossed paths. A group of young cadets actually stopped and saluted him. Did not know whether to feel proud or sad about that. He found Admiral standing at an observation window, looking out at the endless stream of ships coming and going from the station. She had aged in the years since Haven's Rest. Gray had spread through her dark hair, and new lines marked her face. But her eyes were the same as ever, sharp and thoughtful and carrying a weight that few could understand. "You wanted to see me, Admiral." Nodded, still gazing out the window. "Look at them. The delegation arrived this morning. They are requesting a trade partnership with humanity, full access to our markets, shared technology development, the works." She smiled slightly. 5 years ago, they would not let human ships dock at their stations. "They sent a diplomatic mission last week," said. "They want to discuss mutual defense agreements. They seem very interested in learning how our shield technology works. And they have sent 3 envoys this month alone, each one more polite than the last." Finally turned to face him. "They all want to be our friends now. Funny how that works." Considered his words carefully. "Permission to speak freely, Admiral." "Always. Does it bother you that they only respect us because we showed them we could hurt them?" Was quiet for a long moment. When she spoke, her voice was tired in a way that went deeper than physical exhaustion. "It bothers me every single day," she said. "I spent my entire career hoping we would never have to use what we built, hoping that if we were patient enough, kind enough, reasonable enough, the galaxy would eventually accept us for who we are." She shook her head slowly. "That was a beautiful dream, but it was still a dream." She turned back to the window. "We spent 300 years trying to earn respect through our words, through our behavior, through proving that we meant no harm and wanted only peace. And what did it get us? Contempt, mockery, our people killed and our world stolen and our pleas for justice ignored. And now they have seen our ships and counted our weapons and calculated how much damage we could do if we chose to. A bitter edge entered her voice. Now they respect us, not because we earned it through goodness, but because we showed them we could destroy them if we wanted to. Stood beside her, watching the same ship she watched. Vessels from dozens of species, coming and going in a dance that had continued for. Humanity was part of that dance now, not as a guest to be tolerated, but as a power to be reckoned with. I think about the children on Haven's Rest sometimes, said quietly. The ones who would have been forced from their homes if we had not acted. The ones who can now grow up in peace, in the world their ancestors built, without fear that someone will come and take it away. That matters, said. Yes, it does, straightened her uniform, the weariness fading from her posture. And that is why I do not regret what we did. I regret that it was necessary. I regret that kindness alone was not enough. But I do not regret protecting our people. A chime sounded, indicating an incoming transmission. Touched a panel on the wall, and the face of Secretary General appeared on screen. Admiral Captain Mitchell, I hope I am not interrupting. Not at all, ma'am, said. We were just discussing the new state of galactic affairs. Smiled slightly. A popular topic these days. I wanted to inform you both that the Galactic Concord has formally the Human Rights Protocol. Full recognition of human sovereignty over all existing colonies, equal voting rights in the Assembly, and guaranteed protection against forced relocation. Felt something loosen in his chest. 300 years of fighting for basic recognition, and finally, they had won. How did the vote go? Asked. Unanimous. Not a single species voted against. Smile widened. Apparently, they have all decided that humanity deserves to be treated fairly. What a remarkable coincidence. The transmission ended, and stood in silence, absorbing what they had just heard. Unanimous, said finally. They could have done that 300 years ago. They could have treated us fairly from the beginning, but they chose not to until we forced their hand. That is the tragedy of power, said. Those who have it rarely share it willingly. They only respect those who can take it from them. She looked at with something approaching peace in her eyes. But perhaps the next species that comes along, the next young civilization that reaches for the stars, perhaps they will be treated differently. Perhaps our example will show the galaxy that there is a cost to cruelty. You think they will learn? I think they will remember. Every species in this galaxy will tell stories about these years, about the quiet humans from a small planet who smiled through every insult, who endured every injustice, who everyone assumed would never fight back. Allowed herself a small, tired smile, and about the day they finally had enough. She turned from the window and began walking toward the door, fell into step beside her. What happens now, Admiral? Now we build something better. We will still negotiate, still compromise, still seek peaceful solutions whenever possible. Her voice hardened slightly. But we will never again let any species look at humanity and see easy prey. Never again will our silence be mistaken for surrender. They walked through the corridors of Concord Station together, two humans among thousands of aliens, in a galaxy that had finally learned to respect their kind. Behind them, through the observation window, the stars burned cold and bright and eternal. The same stars that humanity had dreamed about for thousands of years. The same stars they had reached for with hope in their hearts and peace on their lips. The galaxy had taught humanity a hard lesson, but humanity had learned it well. And no species would ever forget the price of that education.